Hello there. Welcome to episode 7 of Bow and Blade, a podcast brought to you by medievalist.net, your home for all things medieval on the internet. Bow and Blade gives you a seat at the bar as scholars of medieval warfare go beyond the Wikipedia articles to talk about the debates and questions that we're working on today. I'm Michael Livingston, professor at the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina.
Yeah, I'm Kelly DeVries, professor of history, Loyola University in Maryland. And, when you talk about straight, we're saying, what is currently going on. We got to tell them all, this is currently going on. My colleague here, Mike, he's got a book on Crécy that's due out fairly soon. You got a publishing date yet?
I believe it's in June. I think it's in June it comes out. So yeah, you can pre-order now from wherever fine books are sold. Pre-orders are awesome. That's how you say love to an author. And yeah, the book's called Crécy, The Battle of Five Kings, and it's got a really awesome cover that I did not make.
Yeah,
it's really good. So I'm sure that'll come up more often in the next little bit. This is actually the second part of a conversation that we began in episode 6 about the Battle of Crécy in 1346. Some time has passed.
yeah.
Kelly here has meanwhile been to Europe and back. Good job on that. Your arms must be tired.
They are. I don't think. Well, let alone my nostrils. How many times can they probe up there? I think I earned like a third nostril. I was tested 4 times in 2 weeks, so I know.
Oh man,
everything's completely negative on me. So I'm good there.
Yeah, but how did they tickle your brain? Did they get up in there?
They would have had to find the brain. A lot of people have suggested that is a difficult thing to do. I'm not going to push one. No, it was, but I'll tell you, last week I spent in the medieval manor, and that was built in 14th century, 15th century. And in the reconstruction of this for Landmark Trust, this was Gurney Manor in Somerset, they found the head of a king. And we figured it's either Edward the First or Edward the Third. I was going, I think it's Edward the First, but may have been that, that our boy Edward wants to make sure we interpret this battle correctly. And so he was overlooking.
He was watching over you.
Yeah, he was watching over us. So,
man.
So
that's a lot of pressure.
It is and it isn't. I mean, he is dead. I did see if there were any ghosts around, and
that's true.
No.
Yeah, a stone head can only do so much damage.
It could fall on you. That would be about it.
Yeah, just don't stay under it. Yeah,
stand under.
Yeah,
that's good. Thank you. I got to write that one down. Don't stand.
Yeah, write that. Yeah, post-it note.
Yeah.
Post-it note. Note to self. So what are you drinking at the bar tonight, Kelly?
Well, I drank something in honor of the French last time, and I'm kind of a custom of not drinking with of not drinking something that would be. Let's put it this way. I'm going to drink in honor of the King of Bohemia. How's that? I'm going to have a good Czech beer.
A good Czech beer. Okay,
that's redundant. All Czech beers.
I thought maybe you were just going to go into it blind and just whatever you were given, you were going to be okay there.
Well, in the Czech Republic, that's possible. I could just be given something. Prague's a great city.
It's a great city. There's a little blind King of Bohemia joke for everybody. Yeah, I'm drinking. I'm going nice and light here today. I think I'm having a cherry limeade is what I'm having. I'm having a cherry limeade, people.
Yeah.
It's been a day in which I need to rekindle my youth.
Yeah.
And nothing does it better than a cherry limeade. Just feels good. Feels good. No connection to the battle.
Order your finest English pubs around. That's it.
No connection at all. So I think last time, we covered pretty well the sort of traditional, the traditional story of Crécy and how this battle goes. For those who didn't listen to it, you were wrong, and you should feel ashamed and awful for not having listened to it, because it was awesome, and we tried really super hard, and that you didn't listen to it is shameful. So go listen to it and then come back. If you did listen to it and need a little help remembering, this is 1346, fields of northern France. between King Edward III of the English and King Philippe of the French, or as Edward called him, Philippe of the Valois, because he wouldn't call him king. It was so petty. I loved it. Love it. It's fantastic. And we kind of just went through, like, this is the traditional story. This is kind of how it goes. It's fairly well known, so hopefully everybody knows it.
And we're going to disagree with that today. Our
Yeah,
interpretation's a bit different, isn't it, Mike? We came when we were writing our book, our case book on Crécy, with all the sources, 80 sources we looked at before 1400. We came
yeah.
out with an interpretation that's somewhat different. And where does that interpretation start?
Oh, so there's a number of ways that we could approach this, and then we did approach it. Frankly, the we talked last time about some of the problems that we were seeing with the traditional site, as far as how it kind of laid out, and ways to try and solve that, including rotating the battle on the traditional site. Trying to figure out some way to make this all work. But the more we looked at it, the more problematic it
Yeah.
got. And I think kind of the big swing, the big shift, at least initially, was when I started looking at all the sources and seeing it was in the wrong spot. Presumably, seemed to be in the wrong spot. That all of our sources were saying, and very consistently with one voice, that the battle happens between Abbeville and Crécy, whereas the traditional site is like past Crécy, which it's literally not between the 2 points they give
Which
us.
not a single source says it's past Crécy, and
Yeah,
not a single source. We've got maybe, what is it, about 40, 45 of those 80 sources that say Abbeville and Crécy. And
yeah,
the kitchen
yeah, yeah.
diary, the itinerary, puts it on the outside of the Bois de the Crécy, the forest that is at Crécy, and that doesn't
Right.
go on the other side of the city. So it seemed a
Yeah,
little bit incongruous to consider even switching, even making it so that the French weren't having to do some weird S-shaped charge. Um, Maybe we should think somewhere else. At least that's what Mike was pursuing on the very night we got back from the first time we looked at it. Yeah.
well, it's I was like, "Oh, man, none of this makes sense. Let's look at the sources." And thankfully, and this is a good reminder. Look, digital humanities, these efforts to get stuff available on the internet for people, open access, is awesome. I mean, it literally changed what we're doing that night, that I could hop on Wi-Fi and suddenly get access to this amazing range of stuff, and was able to see, yeah, this none of this looks right. And so that did kind of lead us down this path of, okay, well, let's start collating exactly what all these sources say. As we're producing the sources for the case book, let's pay particular attention to the location. Seeing again that they just keep coming, we would find a new one and think, okay, well, this source is finally going to say it's in the traditional site. Nope, it says it
Yeah.
says it's south. It says it's south, and that just kept happening until we were like, oh, I guess it must have been somewhere else. And then it was kind of a process of triangulation, of trying to figure out, where is a site that would actually work with these armies, work with the tactics, fit the descriptions we have, and be where the sources say that it is, right, something that fits that. And I don't know how it was. Honestly, I don't remember how I ended up looking at these cadastral maps, which are Napoleonic era tax maps, the first sort of systematized um, survey of France, like at a field level, that includes all these local place names. And I don't remember how I got down that rabbit hole, but I did. And yeah, it was in the course of that I found a site that had a lot of toponyms, place names, that matched pretty well. Um, and then I remember approaching you with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
with a lot of trepidation. Like, okay, so I'm going to say something crazy.
Yeah. But,
Uh,
there was a lot of things. I mean, if they go on the traditional side, the kitchen is on the other side. Edward's kitchen is on the other side of the town, and very easily come upon by the French troops. So he wouldn't have anything
they would have run
for his
over it.
troops. He wouldn't have any food whatsoever. They would have that they could have gone around Monroe. They needed to cross a river in order to make the charge that they did when they wouldn't have had to. They could have gone up and come down on Edward's formation. There was a whole bunch of different reasons to go
Oh
away
yeah,
from the old side. Uh, Going to the new one, that was a little bit different. So we worked it through as much as we could, and then we went back.
yeah, yeah. We did, and this is something we've talked before about the necessity of field work and actually getting out there and seeing these things. And so yeah, we had I'd gone through all this stuff, and I was like, oh, this looks pretty good, and Kelly was like, it looks pretty good, but we got to get there. And so yeah, we went back with all that in hand. And one of the central things that we were working off of were two field names, in particular, that were on a location that I'd identified for tactical and matching the sources reasons. It was on the Mount de Crécy, where it's things said that things would be. So it was like on the right spot. It was where you would expect this stuff, right next to the forest. Everything was working. And then again, looking at these cadastral maps, found a couple toponyms that were like, okay, this field is called the Hearse. And Froissart rather famously refers to the Hearse at Crécy. And there's always been this debate. Kelly was in the middle of all this debate about what the hell a hearse was. And he had said, oh, there's all this debate about the hearse. And I'm looking at these maps and this thing hearse. And I'm like, whoa, that's, what a coincidence. Like, that's something to consider.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the other one was a field called the Jardin de Genève, which the most likely interpretation of that is Garden of the Genoese, which, given the fact that a bunch of Genoese were involved in this battle and got slaughtered, and this was just downfield from the hearse where the English position would have been. That looked pretty good. Like, that looked pretty good. But
Looked
yeah, we
good.
went to go visit it. What was your feeling when we were going to visit it, man?
Well, it was, I mean, I was hoping, I was hoping because I knew that it wasn't in the traditional spot. I think we'd proven that fairly strongly.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because I've studied these things for a few years. One of the one of the interesting things that sticks in my mind almost every time I look at an engagement, even one that I'd studied. I'd written about Crécy when my second book on infantry warfare. I'd written about Crécy. Don't read that chapter because I don't think it's right now. But I had I
The book is still a classic, Kelly.
book
It's
is yeah, the
awesome.
book is it doesn't fit. It doesn't hurt the thesis of the book.
Yeah.
But I'd been to Crécy and I'd seen it, and it was really disturbed me that nothing fit, and that you had to manipulate sources because two adages I've always found as far as conflicts are concerned. And I may have mentioned these before because this is for any medieval battle or siege or any engagement whatsoever. All the sources should fit. You shouldn't have to play around with sources. You shouldn't have to say, well, this one that's 100 years later is better than the one that's contemporary and so forth. Every source should fit. And then the second thing is don't assume anybody's stupid. And
Yeah.
everything that we read in the traditional side or in the traditional story that goes with the traditional side is that Philip VI has got to be an idiot.
Yeah.
And he's not. He'd already won one big battle, the Battle of Cassel in 1328. He assumes that he's going to win. He's got more soldiers here. Edward stopped. Um, so we shouldn't begin by saying, and then he makes the most boneheaded move that any
Yeah.
general could ever make. He made some wrong decisions, but I think when we saw the site, and this is what convinced me when Mike and I went back and saw it, is that all the sources fit, one, and two, Philip is not an idiot.
Yeah, and it's that one day, especially the first day that we were there, we spent a few days there, but that first day especially, um, we were all day on that site. It's not a big site. We were there all day, um, and like playing devil's advocate with each other. Like,
Yeah.
okay, like prove this. Like, what about this? What about this? What, like trying to find something that would not add up. And I remember very clearly at the end of the day, we were sitting on a small rise. It's a trash heap, really, an old trash heap that's been covered up on one part of the field. And I remember sitting there, um, and I remember Kelly, you turning and saying, like, my God, like this is it. This is it.
That's it. Yeah.
And I remember replying, yeah, I think so. Like, but we're standing in the middle where thousands of men died. Like,
Hmm.
and we alone probably know it at this point. It was really kind of haunting, a really haunting thing, but also, exciting in its way, right? That if we're right, and obviously, we were still willing to. I mean, we are still willing. I'm totally willing to be
Yeah.
wrong on any of this. Um, uh, that nevertheless, it was awesome to think, well, this kind of changes everything, because one of the things that then happened was that Kelly immediately turned to the question of tactics.
Yeah.
And what do we do if this is the site? Okay, now what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, with our sources and with the tactics of the time. And as you were just saying, Kelly, everything started just falling into place. It was pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah. And did the one things that really amazed me, of course, is we can't. Every time you're reading any of the sources that are most contemporary, especially the French and the Low Country sources, they're talking about Philip moving on roads. His
Mm.
whole army is moving on roads, and there's roads all over the place. I mean, we're not very far from Saint-Riquier, so there's a road to Saint-Riquier from Abbeville. There's a road from Saint-Riquier up to Crécy. Everywhere there's roads through this period, and Edward, according to the kitchen diary, is also keeping to roads.
Yeah.
Guys, you have to have roads to move armies. They're not going to go over fields. Remember, these are medieval fields. They're tilled and they're rough, and it's going to break horses' hooves. If you've got a road, you use it. The traditional site meant that Philip had to leave the roads fairly early, and so all of a sudden we're looking and we recognize, yeah, the both armies using roads to get up here and so forth. That was really compelling to me because it matched all the sources that said that Philip had been moving on roads up to that point in time. We don't have any of them saying then he left and went on the field to go scout out where the English army was.
Right.
Of course, there's a problem with the English army, Mike. Their traditional suggests that they lined up in like a big, huge, long line with archers on the wings.
Yeah.
But we kept coming across something in the text that we're talking about this Wagenburg.
Wagenburg, yeah. And that was another one of these things that was like, why is everybody ignoring this? Because when we started looking through the sources, they're really consistent. Especially our best sources, they all say it. That the English constructed a field fortification of their wagons. We shorthanded this a Wagenburg, but essentially what they did is they'd like kind of circle the wagons basically, but roll the wagons over to make a wall, essentially.
Yeah.
Line these things up, and you have a wall that you can hide behind. It's a terrific defensive fortification. This is done. We have other accounts of this being done. It's not like this is an unheard of thing. And the sources are consistently talking about this, but consistently scholars were ignoring it.
Yeah.
And I don't have we even really talked about, you and I, why we think that why are people so reluctant to accept that Edward did this? Is it do they think this means that he's weak and not somehow the greatest Superman in the world? Is that what it is?
I think partly that's it. Partly that is because Froissart doesn't say anything. Now, Froissart's writing well after it. But
Yeah.
Jean Lebel, who he's using, he says that there's a Wagenburg. And in fact, Villani, Giovanni Villani, who's the most contemporary source, says that there's a Wagenburg. And everybody, I mean, the term is even used, let alone the fact that when they talk about it, they say, when many of the sources talk about it, they'll have the cannons, with the wagons around behind them, and they'll have the
Yeah.
archers, a few archers down in front of them. I'm not understood that. Wagenburgs are used all over the place. There's certainly one in at the Battle of Mons and Pavel in 1304. So the French, those were the Flemings who used it there. The French would have recognized it. It doesn't show a sign of weakness by any stretch, and it appears that in one or two of the conflicts that Robert Bruce fought against the English, used one as well. So it isn't. I mean, it's more common than we want it to be in military history, but it's not so rare that it means, cowardice, or it means that. And what it is that Edward has fortified his position. He wants to fight a battle there. And so he finds this spot, which coincidentally is where the place name Hearse said
Yeah.
it was. And Froissart then says there's a hearse.
Yeah.
Maybe hearse is not an archer formation, especially as it's also used in Froissart in the Battle of Poitiers and the Battle of Nicopolis. And Battle of Nicopolis had no English longbowmen
Yeah.
there,
There's no
so
longbowman there.
especially and not on the Ottoman side, and that's what that's
Yeah.
what is mentioned in there. So the Froissart definitely is not talking solely about an English formation. But here Edward had found this spot, sees that he really has an advantage if he puts together a Wagenburg, if he holds himself there, and then he makes it makes the French come after him.
Yeah.
Defensive tactics like that were well known, and in fact,
It's the smart move. I
it is
mean,
smart.
it's the smart move. And yeah, again, why people don't want there to be a Wagenburg. The sources say it should be there, and it should be there because Edward's not
Yeah,
an idiot. Like this is the smart move. It's a brilliant move. Let me fortify this thing. Come at me, bro. And 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 they do, and he
yeah,
wins. Like terrific. I don't know why nobody wants this. So yeah, we saw this consistently, and on the site you can see right, basically why the terrain even calls for that. You can there's an
yeah,
existing kind of rise in the landscape, that's old glacial pullback. It's kind of carved out, that if you put a Wagenburg along this line, you're on high ground, made even higher.
mhm,
It's a terrific defensive fortification, and look, Edward at this point, he's been on the run since Paris, since he crossed the Seine. He has been just cooking, trying to get away. I know he was writing all these letters about I'll fight you wherever and whenever, but he never stopped. He was just I
yeah,
will fight you, and he threw that letter behind him as he ran, to try and get away, but before he gets cornered. Obviously, he barely gets across at Blanchetaque. The Somme, he's almost trapped, gets across, and he's kind of caught here. He can't run any further. He takes the best damn position he can.
yeah,
He's outnumbered significantly, but with a defensive position like this, that makes up for a lot of disadvantages. And the French foolishly, I mean, the one foolish thing they do is they try to hit it.
mhm,
Um, But when we looked at the terrain, it did make sense why they would think they could do it.
Yep.
That from the French perspective, you couldn't quite see how good this position really was.
Right.
And that was really, to go back to what Kelly was saying about how, nobody's an idiot. Then it was like, oh, that's why this is going the way it is, because the French can't really see.
No, and the one other thing is the Flemings have given up their siege of Béthune. They're on their way. It could be very easily thought that Edward's waiting for their reinforcements to come down and join him.
Oh, they're in
Uh,
retreat.
they're in retreat. Well, they've left Béthune.
They've left
We don't know.
Béthune, yeah.
Yeah, but he doesn't know that. I mean,
Yeah, he doesn't know that.
Yeah, he doesn't know that. Um, there's the other thing is that it explains why the French stick the Genoese out there first. So let's backtrack just a little bit and talk about the march. So the Genoese crossbowmen are somewhere in the march. Now, they're first of all, we've got the contracts. We know exactly what the Genoese are doing with French armies. They're only so many. I mean, they're galleymen, and so when the Genoese are coming on, they've got a contract with the French. They're being paid by the French. They're to use their crossbows. Also, they are all supposed to have neck armor that is a mail and an iron helmet, which, if you think about it, that protects the upper body if an arrow's to come down on it.
Yeah.
The other thing is they've got pavises, large shields that they're supposed to be carrying that go on to the battlefield. And this is because to reload a crossbow, it takes little time. And if they can hunker down below a pavise, they can reload their crossbow, come up, and then shoot again, and then go back down, reload, and so forth and so on. But Philip doesn't. Those are in the baggage carts. They haven't even come yet. Philip doesn't. So he puts those guys out on the battlefield without protective helmet and neck armor, and without their pavises.
Yeah.
Now that makes him pretty stupid.
Yeah.
Except none of the Genoese and Philip had never seen a longbow. So
well, he had probably seen the longbow on the march to Paris, maybe, but yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right.
Them, yeah.
Yeah, there's this tremendous issue of why are the Genoese being ordered out there without this stuff, as Kelly said. Why did they listen? It's like not a good idea. How is it that they were even in that position is another question, because our sources talk about the arrival of forces being kind of chaotic, and the French get to the position and wham, hit. But the Genoese crossbowmen are not in the vanguard of the army. Like they shouldn't even be there. They should be way back somewhere. And yet they're the ones first hitting. That doesn't like so many things were not making sense, and some of those questions weren't really asked. I think you and Nicola Capone were the first ones to ask that question. Why on earth are the Genoese even towards the front? Like that doesn't make any sense. When we're doing the casebook, we didn't really have a good answer for that. I think I've sort of figured that out now, because I think that the army is coming in two different directions. But all that's in the new book. But yeah, this idea of why are the Genoese in the position that they're in, and then worse, why is it that after they go in without their pavises and all this stuff and get just mowed down by the longbow, which they're surprised by, probably because they're all hidden behind the Wagenbergen and the trees. So
we left out there that Edward had hidden some longbowmen in trees.
Yes,
he had.
Yes,
that's
in the trees and the hedges, he had them. Then, which on the site that we were looking at made sense. Now it was like, yep, and those are the trees, and those are the hedges, and that's the position, and that's the whereas on the traditional side, it was like, I don't know where these trees are that these guys are hidden in. That doesn't make any sense here on the topography. But now it was making sense, and you could see, okay, well, if the Genoese go in, then they're all gonna die. Let's see, the longbow shoots about this far, so so it'd be right there, that they'd all die. What's the name of that? That's that Garden of Genoese on the maps. Oh, that's
Yeah.
weird. That's a weird coincidence. That's where they'd all die. And then even more fascinatingly, that um, which we actually didn't know until we went to do the field work, because it's not shown with enough detail on the topographic maps that we had. That Garden of the Genoese is kind of a little natural bowl in the landscape, so that we could actually figure, as these men kind of the Genoese marched up to it, they would sort of disappear from sight. And there's somebody, and if he's listening, I apologize, I forgot your name. There's a guy who's worked on, remember those animations he made where he was showing from the French position the size of a man, and as they went across landscape, it showed that they would disappear as they crossed over onto the Garden Genoese. They disappear from sight, which is what we had thought, and it was cool to see that on a computer animation. Like, dude, awesome technology, rock and roll. And so, yeah, as these guys they'd kind of go out of sight, and then you'd hear all this hollering as they're getting slaughtered. But the French, apparently, we think, must have thought, man, those English are getting it bad. Send in the next line.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why
I
the
think
next line went in.
absolutely. I think Philip actually had sent the Genoese in to loft a few crossbow bolts in the middle of the Wagenburg and get it a little softened up.
Yeah.
That could be the reason why he sent them there. He doesn't know that the English longbowmen are in trees, and they certainly don't know that the English longbowmen are going to come out in mass numbers and go at the Genoese, because they can only see the Wagenburg.
Yeah.
So that explains it. One of the other things that the Genoese they don't just run away. They actually march off the battlefield. I mean, that's the real interesting thing. They are back. I mean, their commanders are still alive, and they're starting to go off the battlefield and getting out of the range of longbow. And suddenly, over the top of this ridge that they couldn't see into the bowl where the Garden of Genoese is, ride the French cavalry.
Yeah. And this is, so this is now what makes sense. Like, that they begin to retreat. But here comes the next line, which is now cavalry, as Kelly said. And when cavalry line hits a line of men on foot, it's chaos. Like, that just absolutely destroys the momentum of the line. It's just, and now you've got another group of people who are pincushions, and this unfolding tragedy, as these guys come in on top of each other, is I mean, it's horrific to imagine this.
Yeah.
But then it starts to make sense. Why are we getting these stories about the run the Genoese down? They betrayed us. This is one of the things that we do get in the sources, is this thing that the French must have thought that the Genoese had betrayed them. And so Philippe orders them run down, and that's why they all run into each other.
Because the stupid commander would send his cavalry into troops, would completely destroy their charge, and make them open to the same archery shot that the Genoese just had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Genoese would continue to work for this king
Oh,
after the battle.
Yeah. He doesn't fire them. They do. They work right through the siege of Calais and well into the next. I don't think they're fired until 1350. I mean, they work always with him. These two commanders, both who are named, they're still under contract for him with him a long time ago. So he must like traitors. That also makes him stupid, doesn't it?
It was just, it was, I mean, the thing that we just kept coming back to was like, all this old story doesn't make sense, but we moved the battle over here, and now it's all locking into place. And it was like every source that had this weird, question about it and like, why would they act that way? Why would that happen? What now? Oh, that's why. Oh,
Yeah.
that's why. Oh, that's why. And everything's making sense. I mean, to the point that honestly, at one point we're sitting there and we're thinking, okay, well, the low country sources that we're seeing are probably on that position on the field, given what they're kind of recording and what they're reporting. That's the right angle from the field to
Yeah.
even see that, because the way that they're describing that, this is the right angle. um and that's ideally, as Kelly was saying, how ideally it should work when we're working on a battle. Things should lock in, once we get into the right spot. If things aren't locking in, that's a problem. Unless we know. I mean, sometimes there are sources that are just deliberately lying or something, but that's unusual, really unusual for
You
something
have to
like
be
this.
awfully cynical to think that,
Yeah.
and you have to be conspiratorial to think that all of them are lying.
Yeah. Yeah. There's not some big
Until the
conspiracy
end of
here.
the 14th century, those sources are accurate. The rest of them aren't. But it is,
uh,
I mean, and the thing that's interesting is that we're not disputing all the sources that are saying this is the moment the French lose the battle, is when
yeah.
that cavalry run into the Genoese. John Lebel says they pushed them all the way to the English Wagenburg, so that the
Yeah.
Genoese and the cavalry, the French cavalry, and the French. John Lebel then goes on and talks about the French cavalry horses being riddled with arrow shot.
Oh
So when
yeah.
they're
Horrifying.
going all sorts of different directions, and I mean, it's an amazing description. And Jean Lebel wasn't there, but he was alive and he knew what was going on, and he places all of these together. So we're not disputing that this is the moment that it happens, and that the English longbowmen actually have a very strong role in it. But it's also as you say, the tragedy, if you're a general, of seeing one unit come into another one, and thus disrupt everybody's momentum and push everybody into the killing field.
Yeah. And it is, the sources talk about the horror of this, the screaming of the horses, the screaming of the men, as all the bows are being loosed on them, and not all of that can be seen from the French command position.
No,
Edward
Edward can
has
see it.
Edward can see
Edward
it
can see it.
so clearly. So there's these stories about a windmill, and this is him viewing from a windmill. And this is one of the things the traditional site was like, we got a windmill. There's windmills, of course, across the landscape. They're all over the place, including one in this position that we found.
Yeah,
And so from that position, Edward would have very clear line of sight, and terrific command and control. Philip doesn't have that, and
no,
so he can't quite see. And yeah, the unfolding tragedy of that, knowing that this horror is happening, and the commander doesn't actually fully know, um, is just, it makes it all the more worse. And that it then kind of continues. Um, his next attempt is to try and attack the entirety of the line. Um, he just
well,
tries to throw everything at them.
he does. He throws everything at him. Edward, having seen what was going on, recognizing the chaos, he sends the line that is under the command of the Black Prince, and he will send them out of the Wagenburg now to stand in front, and then to
Well, that was
move
part of the
forward.
original setup.
Yeah,
That's the original setup. He's got them. He's got an opening in this Wagenburg. He has an opening in this thing. It's almost you can almost imagine like it's not actually a full ring of wagons, because he's got forests on either side of him. He's picked a good kind of pinch point here. But he's covered that opening with wagons, but he's left an opening in that. And he has the Black Prince and a choice group of folk in his first line covering that opening out in front a little bit, begging the French to attack there. And meanwhile, he's got arms, like almost like a horseshoe shape, it's described, extending out, wings of archers, essentially covering that area. So yeah, charge at these guys, charge at this opening, and you're going to get mowed down before you get there. And that appears to be exactly what happens.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think, and I go through all the stuff on this in the new book, because the sources do, when you pick them apart. Yeah, this is what the sources are saying. That line goes forward. They go forward and they enter melee. Why that is, at whose command? I mean, did the Black Prince is nominally in charge of that line? Did he?
He's 16 though. He
He's
is
16.
16.
He's 16. Is he? Could he not hold his water? Could he? Like, was he desperate for glory? I mean, did he see the banner of the brother of the king and think, boy, I'm going to go get that? Like, we don't know. I mean, it might have been not him. It could have been somebody else in that line. But that line goes forward, and all hell breaks loose. Like, up to that point in the battle, the English are just they're mowing down the French. The longbows are just absolutely destroying them. And the plan is working perfectly. I mean, absolutely perfectly.
Yeah.
And when the English enter melee, now you have a problem, because the longbowmen can't just fire into the mass, because now your guys are there, and you don't want to be the guy who put an arrow into the back of the Black Prince. Like, not a good thing. Not going to go well.
Yeah, in fact, we get this moment where all archery shot ends.
It must have, yeah.
It must have, because they go in, and then, I mean, I still wonder how much the archers could penetrate the really good armor of the knights, the mail armor of the knights, of the French knights, some of them having reinforced plates and all these other things. But the horses are gone. The Genoese have no armor on them. Everybody's getting riddled with these, probably finding areas in the armor too. But now the Black Prince has brought in the line, a third of we're told there are 3 lines that Edward has. He brings in one. That's a third of the English army now that are coming out fresh and ready to go hand to hand.
Yeah.
And the Genoese crossbowmen are trying to get off the field because they have no weapons to face hand-to-hand combat. And the knights are basically off their horses. And that's when we get these eyewitnesses, like this Flemish soldier, talk about what he sees, and the herald, the French herald, later talking about, Black Prince gets captured. Kind of an interesting twist that doesn't appear in a lot of historical stories, but he's there in all the contemporary sources that he gets captured.
Yeah. I mean, that's got to be what it is, and that's what the sources say. They say he goes out too far. I mean, he goes too far from protection of lines. So again, he's charging out there. Woo! And don't go too far, kid. He goes too far, and gets captured. We have several stories that are like how this happens. One which is not very believable, but is still really entertaining, about a count named Valentino doing it. But what they are saying makes a lot of sense, in that, he's captured. The source is pretty clear on that happened. This is probably the origin of the legend that somebody comes to King Edward and says, in the windmill, and says, my liege, my lord, your son is hard pressed. What shall you do? Let us send some men. And he's like, no, let the child earn his spurs. And they go to find him anyway, and he's lounging among the French dead, just waiting for the next wave to come so he can slaughter them too. This is probably the origin of that story, and that story is a way of kind of propagandistically, like changing. Like, we know that he was out there. We know there was this call to help him, but he didn't need it. He was too good. What the non-English sources are saying, the Low Country sources, the French sources, these eyewitness accounts, what they're saying is, no, He did need help. He was
Yeah.
captured.
Yeah.
He is rescued. Edward actually did leave the windmill to bring another line out to try and save his son's butt, knowing, look, if his son is captured, like that's it. Here goes potentially the whole war. I mean, he's gonna get a prince's ransom if they capture him. He's screwed. And so yeah, they come out after him, and do recover him. The Bishop of Durham drags him back into the English lines.
Yeah.
And when I can't remember which of the sources, if you remember, Kelly, is it maybe the Citizen of Valenciennes that talks about Edward chastising him, like
Yeah.
telling him, you almost lost the whole thing, kid.
Yeah, none of these this speech that Froissart has later on, where he goes up and says, "Well done, you've earned your spurs."
Yeah,
He actually chastises him for going out there too far. It's curious because we do have all this evidence then that starts falling in, as we talked about. Sources start falling into place and so forth. And there's this wonderful, the Herald who is out there. He talks about the fact that he sees, is it the Count of Blois or is it the Count of Flanders that is bloody and dying, and they see the Black Prince's banner on the ground, and they go and embrace it before they die, and gives an answer to what other things I think, because we see in and I can't remember which source it is that talks about the French actually divvying up who they had the right to capture, and so
yeah.
someone of the Black
Before the battle.
Princes, yeah, before the battle, someone of the Black Princes um, some of his status then has to capture him, and other than the king, of France, there really isn't anybody except for these larger counts, the Blois, Flanders, some of those.
Yeah, and you're quite right. Yeah, it was the Count of Blois. And so I'm just going to quote to people. So this is in the casebook that Kelly and I did. I think actually, no, I know. I quote this in the new book because it's too
Yeah,
darn good. I try to take all the good bits and use them. So this is this herald on the French side, and he goes through all this in a dream vision. I think because he's so traumatized by what he's seen. He's trying to separate himself a little bit from it by talking about a dream vision. And so this is these ladies, Lady Loyalty and Lady Prowess. Yeah, these great figures, Lady Bravery kind of thing, talking about what these guys did and what they sacrificed. And so this is one of them here. It says, the noble Count of Blois, I saw him fighting on foot. Loyalty saw it. She was there. Indeed, Prowess, so were you. You made him descend from his horse with a meager retinue of men. There was his sword bathed in blood. There I saw him bleeding and wounded, going on, fighting on foot, always ahead without turning back, until he had brought the standard of the Prince of Wales all the way to the ground and held it in his arms as he died. Lord, what valor. Like, that's wow.
It's very powerful, and we have to remember. I mean, this we talked about this in the last broadcast. The Herald is describing this. His responsibility is to name these
Yep.
dead French. He's doing this after the battlefield, and King of England has assigned him to identify the French dead who are noble, so that they can be separated from those, I suppose, that are not noble. And he can only find very few, but he has this whole story about the Count of Blois that gives you an indication. Either he or one of the men he talked to knew exactly what the Count of Blois what had happened to the Count of Blois,
Yeah.
and why they were able to identify him when they did.
And yeah, and of course that notion of him holding the standard of the Prince of Wales. I mean,
Yeah,
like, well, so the standard fell. Well, why did the standard fall? Well, the Prince of Wales got capped. Like, it all just fits together. And
right.
it makes this battle that, look, there's a reason Crécy is a very famous battle. But it was also a confusing one. And
Mhm.
and now to be able to recognize, oh, this is how it happened, to the best of our knowledge. And I mean, so the book, that I've got coming out this summer on Crécy, there's some stuff in there where I'm like, I disagree with what Kelly and I said in the casebook. Like, there's some more information has come out,
Yeah.
and this is what makes sense, which is kind of how history is supposed to work. Like, new information, if you're sticking by your old guns in the face of new information, like, what are you doing? Changing one's mind is good if new information changes it.
Yeah.
That said, not everybody has agreed with us.
No, but I mean, that makes the fun of historical interpretation, historical discourse, is that you don't necessarily have to agree. You can go back and forth. It, I mean, there are other things that the Black Prince being captured is very important, but sometime around this period too, Philip leaves the battlefield. He's
Yeah.
taken off. He's dragged off. Somewhere in this, the Blind Prince is taken on, whereas his son, who will become Emperor Charles IV, is taken off the battlefield. But his father, who is blind, is led onto the battlefield and killed.
Yeah.
And I really think the Chronique Normande is a wonderful source because it's written by a military leader, although he's not at the battle. He's at Caen at this time. But he does describe that the French, because they're all lined up, marching from Abbeville to this site, they're continuing to come. The last ones are the militias. And he says that the militias saw what was happening, all this chaos, saw the battle was gone, and all the militias left except for the Orleanais, who marched on the battle and died to a man. And
Go
you
down.
think, wow, again, one of these things that could not have happened if it was on traditional source. You can't get militia marching across fields and over a river and fording a river and then onto a battlefield and have some of them say, yeah, it doesn't work. If you're on a road, they come up, they say, yeah, it's not working. They can get out a lot faster. And they do.
And of course that question arose. I mean, not to beat literally a dead horse, which is, I think, the traditional side is. I mean, this notion of Philippe being taken from the field, he's taken to a location that on the traditional site would be behind enemy lines. Like there's just this, like, what they took him. You should get away, sir. Go ride behind the English lines and go to that castle over there. Like, what are you doing? That doesn't make any sense. And the fact that people the next day are like, they're in Amiens. Why are they in Amiens? That doesn't make any sense. They should be in Abbeville. But they go to Amiens. Well, on the site that we've located and reconstructing it, everything makes sense again.
Yeah.
So I mean, Crécy is a remarkable battle by any stretch of the imagination. And certainly we think it's long been misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've figured it out pretty well. What more do we need to say about Crécy, man?
Second battle? The next day?
Oh yeah, the next day there's a whole nother battle. There's 2 days worth. That was another thing that was like, oh, I don't think people talk about this. That our sources are pretty clear on. It's 2 days. The first battle begins late in the day and continues until nightfall. So and I mean into the night, which is unusual. So much so that the French, most of them don't know what's happened.
Yeah.
So many of them are even the ones who kind of retreat, and clearly, I mean, the command and control is completely gone. They've no idea what's happened. The English aren't sure what the hell's happened. Our sources describe the English like there's not a route after Crécy, which is normally what you'd have. You'd have a route where you're just chasing people down. It's not what happens. The English are sort of stuck in place. Like, we don't know what the hell happened either. Let's find out when the sun comes up. But it's foggy the next day. And so they put out some kind of feelers, like, small group of guys go out on horseback, try and figure out what happened. And run into these small groups of these French who have been in the fields, like sleeping, trying to hide out because there's the fog and the French don't know what's happened. The French are like, well, let's ask these guys on horseback, hey, what happened? And then these English knights start slaughtering these guys in the field. And so there's this whole like continuing thing of death the next day, and then another big fight because another French lord shows up and coalesces a big group of dudes along with Charles of Bohemia, and they make another huge assault, massive assault that's also turned away.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's it, and the sun's up, and everybody can see, this an absolute devastation. The king is long gone. Philippe at that point is headed to Amiens.
Yeah. Or in Amiens, maybe even.
Or yeah, maybe at that point even Amiens. I mean, he takes off, takes a big looping road to get there. He goes to Le Broye at first when he's pulled off the field. Stays there not very long, and then goes to Doullens and then Amiens the next day, which is, if you were looking at a map, a pretty wide berth he's giving to Edward's position. Like, he clearly doesn't want to be anywhere near that. Goes all the way around, and that's where they finally kind of coalesce, and he starts to learn what happened, beyond what he'd seen when he'd left, of course. And the English are able to stay in place for a couple days at that point. They call truce basically for I think it's a 3-day truce, and and don't fight us, we won't fight you. We got a lot of dead to deal with. And it's at that point that Collins of Beaumont comes to the field and identifies such dead as he can, 33 names. And
more than anybody else, he says.
More than anybody else. Yeah, that's more than anybody else. I've got all the lists of the dead. He's got the biggest one, and the most detail.
Mm-hmm. But out of how many nobles on the French side died? I mean, there were probably near 1,000 that were knights and above.
Yeah, so 1,500 knights is what a lot of the sources say. They're counting that by spurs, probably. This kind of thing, like they're counting by artifacts at that point. Which if they're using spurs, which is what we had at the Battle of Golden Spurs, rather famously, I have this kind of lingering question of whether or not that's a double count.
Might be, but it
and then it's half that number.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that Collins only finds 33. I mean, out of all those
33 noble lords,
33 noble lords he finds.
Yeah.
Not nearly the number who were dead. So this, the battle had been really, really fierce. We've got to figure that. It may have been 2 hours max, but it was an incredible fierce display of martial arts, but a display of tragic consequences for the French, not nearly as much for the English, but certainly tragic consequences with the French. When we think about how many there were in that army, how many died.
Yeah.
Because there's no prisoners taken the first day. We know that. Edward had said very plainly, no quarter given. No.
Well, we don't know when that one guy was captured.
Yeah, we have found. In fact, this is another find that Mike and I had almost by chance. We're in the British Library trying to find the kitchen diary and so forth, and I see that they've listed something as Crécy, and so I bring it out. It's a little tiny slip of paper, and it's dated around 1350, isn't it? One of the sons of someone who'd been captured in the battle. Right. Asked if he could sell his forest to raise the ransom to get his father out. This is, again, never been, it's sitting there in the catalog, says Crécy ransom note, and nobody had ever looked at it except for Remy Boule, who then transcribed it and translated it for our book. Remy is the expert on prison war during the 100 Years' War, and he had a footnote where he referred to that. I was the only one, and then he did translate it and transcribe it for the case book, and it's pretty fun to look. but that's the only one that we know of any nobility. And Mike and I are wondering if it could have been on the second day, where there seems to have been less of a concern about making sure your lines don't dissolve and you've got
Right.
to get conflict done.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know, but yeah, I think yeah, we agree that probably that was taken on the second day. Um, but yeah, it is just a staggering event. You know, when you think about the totality of the Crécy story, what's the one piece of information you wish you had, or one thing you wish you had?
That's well, I mean, I'd love to know why. Okay, the big criticism, and why doesn't Edward, um, at this point, then march on Paris? That's one of them. Why does he march to Calais? Now, I think it's because he thinks he wants to have a place for the wool, where he can bring it in. He can make the money. He doesn't have to pay. He doesn't have to pay a amount of money. He controls the wool export in England, and can make some funds off of it. And he wants a safe location to do it. I'd like to know that I'm right on that. I'd like to know. Okay, Ed, Bud, we're drinking a couple of Guinnesses here, or whatever. I don't think he'd drink Guinness, wouldn't he? They're
Probably
kind of
not. No,
probably
he would
Irish.
want the red wine. He'd want his red
They'd
wine.
want the red wine, Bordeaux wine. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true. So
Bordeaux.
we're knocking our cups back, and I say, okay, why not Paris? But I don't think he has. I mean, I don't think he has any supplies to go down to Paris, and I don't think he has a lot of things. But I'm not even sure that was his goal initially. I think it was really getting a site, or at least once Crécy had been decided in his favor, he now can go up and get a site where he can bring the wool in safely and get it to Flanders safely. Calais is the biggest port in that part of the northern French country, or northern France coastline.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good.
But I'd like to know that. I'd like to know for sure I'm right.
Yeah, yeah. I I would most like to know um, what he actually said to the Black Prince.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have this quote. Um, Again, I think it's the citizen of Valenciennes, who says he says it's a sarcastic comment. It's like, so was battle everything you expected, or something like
Yeah.
this, and then it says, and the Black Prince was ashamed, and you're like, oh, okay. Um, uh, I would love to know, like, is that really what he said, or like, what was that exchange? I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall when Edward III finally, and because it looks like he didn't do it immediately, because that whole night they're expecting a counterattack.
Yeah.
He gives out the order. It's dark. We don't know what's happened. We don't know how many more French are out there. Stay in position. Be ready for another attack. So it only would have been the next day, after the chaos of that day, that he could have really done this. And I would love to know what he said to that kid, a 16-year-old kid. I know people like, Black Prince, rah, rah, rah. He's 16 years old.
Yeah.
What did he say to him? You almost cost everything. How'd that exchange go? I'd love to know.
I'd love to know too, and the fact that there's a large number in that line, and they all stick with the Black Prince. So later on, when the Black Prince goes off his own, doing the chevauchés down the south in the Battle of Poitiers, all these guys who have been with him at Crécy are still there with
Yeah.
him. So they must have seen this, even if it was the wrong thing to do. They recognized that this was a young leader to follow.
Yeah.
And this was, he's going to make mistakes, but he's going to be able to he's going to be able to write things. And of course, the Black Prince is the one who defeats in the next big battle, in Battle of Poitiers, which we will look at down the line.
Yeah.
The Black Prince is the one who will defeat the King of France, the son of Philip VI, and capture him and bring him back to France, or bring him back to England, rather.
Well, they're gonna lock us in, man.
Yeah.
They're gonna lock us in if we don't get going.
Yeah,
So
especially since they're saying, 2 weeks on Crécy?
get out of here. Get out of here. So that's Battle of Crécy. You know, again, if you want a lot more detail, final time I'll say it, I swear. Buy my book. Buy my book, Crécy, Battle of Five Kings, coming to you this summer. Pre-order now.
And if you want all the sources, all translation, facing page, casebook is still available.
Yeah, the Battle of Crécy, a casebook by yours truly and his truly, the two of us. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please do join us next time when I believe we're talking about the Battle of Nicopolis. Is that
Nicopolis? Yep.
Yeah.
Go back to the Ottomans and the Ottomans.
And we'll talk about the what a hearse is potentially because
it's
there supposedly at Flossart. As ever, a reminder. This podcast is sponsored by medievalist.net. So the best way to support us, other than buying our individual books, of course, is to join their Patreon at patreon.com/medievalist. And that's also the best place to drop us a line if you have questions for our next Q&A, which is only like 3 episodes away. So we're coming up to it. We need questions. We need to know what you want to know and what we can answer on this podcast for you. So thank you for listening. Cheers, everybody.